Possibly one of them there would be Satoshi, right? But a few things were also happening where I came from in the UK. I eventually moved to San Francisco and became a traveling mendicant cypherpunk. I went to the meetings, all of those people, I'm happy to tell you the gossip. But what I want to convey to you is what it means to be in a small group of people trying to change the world, right? When we look at the history of anything really, the history of the universe, the history of social endeavor, right? We look at it from the moment now. And for a lot of us, right, the moment now makes us think that this is a mature ecosystem that's too large that we can't change anything. We come into this, perhaps you joined in 2021, and you see ETHDenver, and it's like this huge institution, and we're just tiny ants, right? We're tiny ants wandering around trying to make a difference, trying to show what we're doing, trying to learn a tiny slice of the action. And not only is that the wrong way to think about the present day, right? It's the wrong way to back derive it, because you assume that ETHDenver has always been here. You assume that peer-to-peer networks and decentralization and cryptocurrency has always been here, and you assume that these institutions that you see now are both permanent and also kind of what grew fully formed in that way, right? And they don't. They start like this. They start with like 3 or 4 people getting together, talking, having a project, and then trying to execute it on it. And more importantly, sometimes you fail, right? And one of the other errors that we make in history is that we only draw conclusions from the successes. And once again, you might back derive all of this and go, okay, the first thing I want to do if I'm building a big decentralized network, right, is to be as big as Bitcoin. But of course, that's not the truth, right? You start at a small level, and then you grow, and you grow in your own way. So let's go back to 1995 and 2000 in the UK and in San Francisco. In 1995, a computer scientist still working today, and we'll touch back on him at the end because it'll be an important part as I pick the future of decentralized storage for you. And yes, I will mention Filecoin at some point. It does fit into the narrative here. I know who's paying my buck. But anyway, there was a computer scientist called Ross Anderson. If you ever really want to learn about the other cryptography, I really recommend Ross Anderson's books. He's a really great figure in understanding the trade-offs of security. But Ross Anderson wrote a thing called the Eternity system, and it's a white paper. You will recognize it, written in LaTeX. It's written in that font, and it describes a permanent decentralized storage system for the internet. And one of the things that's interesting if you read that paper is it really talks about how this is an extension of what was the internet then in 1995, right? And in some ways, the first decentralized storage system that you might want to think about is the original internet, right? FTP, right? This idea, very radical at the time, right? The storage system for documents, scientific documents, whatever, could be stored on computers all around the world rather than having one central computer dispensing that information. Of course, that was the sort of genius behind Tim Berners-Lee, drawing on the idea of hypertext, right, which had been around since the 60s, and this revolutionary idea that you should be able to jump in documents, right? Those documents didn't have to be physically stored in the same place. You have that idea of linking, of making connections. And it was only when a network where every node had the capability to both read and write that became at all a useful or practical thing. So we have the Eternity service, and notice that eternity thing there, because the problem that Ross Anderson was dealing with was, we're up to 1995, I've been 10 minutes, okay, I might need to speed up, how do we preserve data for the long term? And this brings us back to this theme of history, right? And the history being recorded by the winners. We know a lot about Roman history, we know a lot about early Christian history. And some of that is to do with the fact that the Christians built all the other documents in Europe and the Romans were a large empire. But it's also about the materials that those documents were written, right? The Romans built statues out of marble after Augustus said that he was going to turn Rome from a city of mud into a city of marble. The Celts, the northern Europeans, built everything from wood. No, reason. It's just a lot of wood around there, right? So we don't have even the ruins, even the inspiration of the European style, because all that word rotted in the dismal, rainy atmosphere of Europe, which is another reason why I left to move to California. But we do have that, again, as an accident in the Roman Empire. So when you build, right, you have to build on something stable. You have to build on something firm. And even in 1995, there was a realization, and this was genuinely a surprise to the first generation of sort of digital natives. There was an assumption that, like wood, physical items were temporary, right? That things were going to decay. Celluloid film was decaying, so the idea was you would digitize all this information, and then it would be permanent, stay forever, because bits don't rot. As you all know, because we're now 30 years in the future, right, bits absolutely rot. There's hardly any records of that period in living history of what happened and what went on there, apart from the people who were smart enough to either feed it to the Internet Archive and so forth, right? You see, as people are trying to learn who Satoshi is, they're like doing archaeology, right? They're digging up these emails and the ones that they find to try and retrace these steps. And that's another reason why it's very hard to learn from anybody but the winners in history, because the people who didn't win, or people who made mistakes, don't want to talk about it, right? They're not going to like publish a book going how I fucked up. And the winners, obviously, everybody retells those stories, and they have a very prominent thing. So you know about the PayPal mafia, you don't know about all the other people who tried. You don't even know the many, many mistakes that the PayPal mafia made to get to where they are, because those were underplayed. It's another reason why we need to collect all the things. We need to store absolutely everything. I was talking to Filecoin, works very closely with the Internet Archive, right, which you may know as being one of the places where all of this information is stored, right? Because Bruce DeKay, a visionary of his time, like went, no, this stuff is going to evaporate unless somebody, and I'm a data hoarder, so I'll do it, stores all of this data. So those are the records we have. The tragedy is, right, that there's only one copy of the Internet Archive, and it's very close to where I live in San Francisco. Actually, an amazing building that looks exactly like a church, and it is a church. It's an old Church of Scientology building. And if you ever go to San Francisco, you can go and visit the Internet Archive. You go into this thing, it's a church, it has pews and everything like that, and instead of stained glass, it has all of these servers blinking lights, and every blinking light in that place is another gigabyte of data being shared with the rest of the internet. And Filecoin is working with the Internet Archive to decentralize that, because you need more than one copy, and you definitely don't need that one copy in a major earthquake zone. So anyway, I digress. So let's move back to the early internet. And fast forward to the year 2000. Who here knows Zuko? Zuko from Zcash. I mean, not personally, but maybe personally. Okay, so Zcash, Zuko,